Palmeiras appeared to lag behind Flamengo's progress with Lucas Paquetá. But now, according to some sources, they've made progress in signing John Arias and have moved ahead of Flamengo. Is this real? We'll discuss the information we have here. So stay until the end of the video because we're going to talk about this topic, talk about Lucas Paquetá, and also talk about the transfer market. And here we go. Just like that. Hey guys, red black greetings, this is Flamengo. Welcome to the Paparazzo Rubro-Negro channel. Welcome, please follow, like, and share on all platforms. Subscribe below if you're on YouTube. Turn on notifications, the little bell, and leave a cool like on the video. We're here once again, brought to you by our sponsors, always with us. Aroto Caravan, you can secure your spot at Flamengo games in Rio, outside of Rio, with tickets at Maracanã. Man, it's a really serious company, so get to know Aroto Caravan right now. The one that never lets you down, making sure you're at every Mengo game. If you're from outside Rio, you can join a great reception in Rio de Janeiro and watch games at Maracanã with tickets included, like the Recopa. Now, there's still time for you to make sure you're at the game against Lanús in Buenos Aires and also at Maracanã. We're also here to bring you some important information brought to you by our sponsors. We need to mention Mais Cabelo. You can lose weight. Just use the link or QR code on the screen for a healthy approach. At Mais Cabelo, remember that Mais Cabelo is always close to you. Anywhere in Brazil, man, there's a Mais Cabelo clinic in every corner of the country. I lost around 70 kilos with the Mais Slim program from Mais Cabelo. We also invite you who are here with us to get to know all of our sponsors. In the pinned comment, also reminding you, man, that we have the Placa program, always at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Since the time has changed, make sure to schedule Placa Aberto for 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Subscribe to Placar, and when the program begins, mention you came from Paparazzo Rubro-Negro. It will be a pleasure to have you with us at Placa to discuss everything that's happening with Carioca football. Look, Flamengo is now at the bottom of the table and might have to face a playoff to avoid relegation to Serie A2 of the Carioca Championship. It seems unbelievable for us to even imagine something like this. Even without playing, Flamengo's situation worsened in the Carioca Championship. With Marica's win over Portuguesa do Rio, Flamengo ended up at the bottom of Group B in the Taça Guanabara. Unbelievable. Zanotto makes changes in their last overall with one more game played. This could put Flamengo in a situation that the fans never even imagined. Let me explain. So Flamengo, with the youth players, with the under-20s, hasn't won. In the Carioca, it's 1 point out of 9. And so they're at the bottom of Group B, with just 1 point in 3 games. And most teams have only played 2 games. Flamengo is last with 1 extra game played. Flamengo is going to desperately need a win, but who are they up against? Vasco and Fluminense, classic matches with the youngsters. According to the rules, the bottom 2 teams from each group in the Carioca Championship play a 4-team round robin to avoid relegation to State Championship Serie A2. In other words, the bottom 2 teams from each group play in a 4-team round robin. These 4 teams face each other in home and away matches. At the end of the 6 matches, the last place team in the round robin is relegated to the Carioca Serie A2. Unbelievable right now. Besides Flamengo, the bottom team in Group B, which Flamengo is competing in, there's Marica, 5th in Group B, Portuguesa, 6th in Group A, and Sampaio Correa, 5th in Group A. Those would be the 4 teams in the round robin. I don't see a chance of Flamengo being relegated. No, I don't see the starters even losing a single game in this round robin. No. And if Flamengo really does compete, but the way those guys are playing under 20, but that's not the point. Can you handle seeing Flamengo's jersey beaten by rivals and Flamengo fighting relegation in the state championship playoffs? I can't handle it. That's Flamengo's jersey right there. In 20 years, they'll say it was Flamengo. Another thing, let's also talk about the issue of injuring players. Palmeiras has already lost Vitor Roque and Andre. This has already happened to them and could happen to Flamengo too. Many people use this example to argue against using professional players, but I'm in favor of doing a test and using only a few players who are doing well in the exams. It's not about using Arrascaeta. I'll explain it to you, especially those players who played little at the end of 2025. A mixed team isn't the plan there, especially with players like Leo Ortiz, Leo Pereira, Varela, Pulgar, Jorginho, Arrascaeta, and Carrascal. Pedro, who came back from injury at the end of the year. The suggestion would be Andre, who just got registered in the Boletim Informativo Diario, and Vitão, who also just arrived. An international didn't play in the Club World Cup or the Copa do Brasil semifinals and finals. In other words, they didn't go until the end of the year. Ayrton Lucas could play left back, but I've said Sandro was more of a starter. Everton Araujo, Alan, who played very little, Samuel Lino, Gonzalo Plata, and Michael. Michael barely played at all. Basically, these guys, if they're physically fit for at least a while, even Michael is of interest. Another team might leave, but that's unrelated. Even if he goes, Flamengo could, I'd say, use the player even though he hasn't signed. There is still uncertainty about which team will take the field in the next rounds of the Carioca Championship. And I'm not saying this, man, even when I was upset after the 3-0 game against Volta Redonda, I said no, a planning mistake. The planning mistake I'm talking about isn't that I wanted them to use Arrascaeta and company. No, the planning I'm talking about is not preparing to use at least the players who didn't play much. Last year they used a mixed team. The club has already considered and used the mixed team with main squad reserves for upcoming games. But it seems they've changed their mind and it looks like they'll go with the youth team. Let's wait, they'll go with the under-20C. Flamengo's schedule in the Carioca is this Wednesday at 9:30 post-meridiem against Vasco at Maracanã, Fluminense on Sunday the 25th at 6 post-meridiem at Maracanã, and Flamengo versus Sampaio Correa on Saturday, February 7th at 9 post-meridiem at Maracanã. I'll repeat, the concern is embarrassment, not relegation. Embarrassment is real, it happens. Who wants to talk here about Flamengo's transfer market? Since Juninho, who changed the way of operating in the market, avoided gambles and invested almost 400 million in established signings, obviously in installments. Unlike what Abel Ferreira said, Abel Braga is at Inter. Flamengo went after Flamengo players with established signings. They looked for a striker in Azerbaijan in 2025, but the signing didn't work out and was sold at the end of the season. The bet on Juninho, as we mentioned, didn't work out, and the next signings were of established players, mostly from more traditional European clubs, now even from Mexico. Juninho scored a decisive goal there. He's already shining there, which also shows what was missing was opportunity, playing time, and everything else. Many times the mistake isn't in the signing, but in the whole context. The fact of having a strong squad ends up undermining the chances for some. That's a fact, so sometimes it wasn't the wrong signing by Boto and company. He never got a chance to prove himself, and since then, Flamengo has stopped taking chances on lesser-known players. Since Juninho, the least hyped signing was Emerson Royal. Had a brief career in Brazil at Ponte Preta and Atlético Mineiro. He played for prominent clubs like Barcelona, Tottenham in England, Barcelona in Spain, Tottenham in England, and was bought by Milan in Italy. And the right back was signed to be part of the squad and still hasn't secured a permanent starting spot. He played even less. He was considered as another option, but said his preseason would improve since he was injured last year. He was injured, so I wouldn't use Royal. He'd be just another name like the others I mentioned. The other new signings, however, arrived in Rio de Janeiro with high expectations. The center-back, a two-time Champions League winner and world champion, the defensive midfielder, a Champions League and Euro Cup winner, the midfielder and forward with impressive spells at a major club in Spain, and the midfielder compared to Neymar and highly valued in Europe. Speaking of players who are riding high right now, there's Vitão, the standout center-back from the Brazilian champions, and Andrew, the award-winning goalkeeper in Portugal. So the change in profile is not only about being sure of the quality of the new signings, but also about Flamengo's economic strengthening. When BAP took over management, he started to avoid big signings until the finances were balanced. The situation changed in the second transfer window. Flamengo then made the biggest investment in its history, and even so, it wasn't bigger than Palmeiras, as Abel said. Since Juninho, Flamengo has spent nearly 400 million on player signings. I'm going to bring up Abel Ferreira's statement again here, but this time about the Supercopa. One of Coach Dorival Jr.'s requests to the Corinthians board in this transfer window is the signing of a former Flamengo player, a defensive midfielder. One of the names being monitored and that interests Corinthians is Vini Souza, a former Flamengo player, 26 years old. He belongs to Wolfsburg from Germany and was a favorite of Jorge Jesus. You remember him, right? Signed around the middle of last year, Vini Souza started the European season as a starter, but lost his spot after coach Paul Simonis left. The defensive midfielder has been on the bench for the last 5 rounds of the German Championship and hasn't been used, okay? Corinthians checked the possibility of a loan for the player who has a contract until mid-2020. Corinthians know they're struggling financially to sign players they won't be able to pay. The player already has a higher value in Europe. But the possibility of returning to Brazil, previously dismissed by Vinicius Souza and his staff, has started to be considered in recent weeks. Flamengo could bring him back, right? Midfielder returning, even on loan. He played with Hugo Souza, Matosinho, Gustavo Henrique, all of whom Corinthians players like. And that could help with the transfer since he would go there to strengthen the team. Corinthians against Flamengo in the Super Cup look at Flamengo. He also worked with Renan Blois, now Corinthians market analysis manager. So like it or not, Corinthians is leading in this, right? He was sold in 2020 to Lommel by Flamengo. Lommel from Belgium. In the European country, he also played for Koninklijke Football Club, right? Koninklijke Football Club Mechelen, right? Then he went to Espanyol. I remember him at Espanyol. He stood out there. Then he went to Sheffield United, and he also stood out there in England. Okay? And now, Corinthians is keeping an eye on Flamengo. They could bring him in. Palmeiras too. There you go. Look, they said they've made progress in the possible signing of John Arias, right? Several outlets reported yesterday that Palmeiras was signing John Arias for 14 million euros. I don't know if you guys saw that, okay? So, Palmeiras would have made progress with John Arias and seen Thiago Almada move away. His signing is unlikely due to the amounts in negotiations with both players, right? Both are in top leagues in Europe. Palmeiras also already knew that it was most likely to bring only one of them, according to Gazeta Esportiva. Okay, so is there a positive outcome? Arias' negotiation would have gotten closer and could happen in the next few days. So, the media in Sao Paulo are saying that Palmeiras is signing Arias, and there was also media from abroad saying the same thing from England. Fluminense has first rights to Arias' return to Brazil and must match the offer to use this priority. The club from Rio de Janeiro is willing to use this clause, according to President Mateus Montenegro. Montenegro at Botafogo, Montenegro at Fluminense, right? I meant to mention this before, but they still haven't done anything about it. With Arias closer, Thiago Almada is farther from Palmeiras. The former Botafogo player is not convinced that returning to Brazilian football is the ideal path at this point in his career. What caused the negotiations to cool off? So it's important for us to talk about these situations because a lot of people also asked about him at Flamengo. Flamengo was interested in Arias. Fans asked for Almada. About information on Paquetá, I'll talk about it in a moment, but it's also important for us to bring up these statements from Abel Ferreira, which, in my opinion, were shameful. Speaking of the market, when they spent much more than Flamengo, open quotes for Abel. I want to understand, but I'm not the person who's going to explain this to you. The budget isn't in the buying and selling. I can buy a player who's going to cost me 20 million euros and pay for him over 5 years, but everyone does that, right, Abel? I already talked about this yesterday. Now I'm bringing his statement here so we can explain it better. That's not how you calculate it when you buy a house. You don't pay it all at once. You pay in installments. That's why when these narratives are created, I completely understand. But it's in the budget that we need to make the comparison. That's not how things work. You have to check the year-end budget and everything to really know what was spent, he says. Palmeiras didn't spend 700 million. Palmeiras spread it out, paid it in installments for Vida Rock. Palmeiras is going to pay over 4 or 5 years. It's an expense we have, but it doesn't go into this year's budget. It's an expense that Palmeiras will pay. Just to be clear, but I completely understand the narratives. It's one, he loves it. It's the budgets that actually play a role in the articles and so on. Palmeiras is very good at doing what it always does, having a competitive team that always plays to win or to be runner-up through clear processes, consistency, and fiscal responsibility. So, Abel says outrageous things as if only Palmeiras pays in installments and the others don't. If Palmeiras pays in installments, everyone else does too. And taking the opportunity to say that we're talking about the transfer market and it has to do with what Flamengo is trying to sign. Arias, Palmeiras too, and Almada are also competing for some players, and Arias posted some stories. He posted a photo of himself playing in a Wolverhampton shirt. With the following word he wrote, "We move on," made the post wearing the shirt, the word "We move on," a fist bump, and a wolf next to it. In other words, we move forward at Wolverhampton, confirming he's staying with the English team. Flamengo's management even reached out to the player, but they didn't get a positive response about returning to Brazilian football. When it came to Flamengo, Arias was even interested, but he didn't give a positive sign about coming to Flamengo. We always bring you reality. It won't be an easy mission for anyone. Nothing is finalized with Palmeiras, as Arias stated in his post. Anything is possible in football. But apparently nothing is finalized. We'll wrap up our morning video here. Many people are asking me when the situation with Lucas Paquetá will be resolved. Flamengo has already made the offer. Flamengo has offered an amount for Lucas Paquetá, and despite a lot of information coming out, including some rumors, we were the first to say 4 days ago that Flamengo could reach 42 million euros, could reach 42 million euros. It's not that Flamengo made a 42 million offer, as some said. Flamengo could reach 42 million euros. So, yesterday I was even checking, together with Thiago Asmar, who is my friend, we received similar information regarding the possible 42 million euros. In fact, Planeta do Flamengo published and reposted our tweet from a few days ago about the 42. But the information I have is that Flamengo can't go over 40 million euros. Flamengo will try to close at the threshold of 40 million euros. So, the offer that will be made is 35 million euros probably, with the possibility of more bonus targets to reach 40 million. But Flamengo doesn't want to break that 40 million euro barrier. Paparazzo Flamengo has already made the offer for Paquetá. Esther, no. Up until now, Flamengo hasn't made the offer, and the expectation is that Flamengo, with BAP's approval, will present an official offer for Lucas Paquetá today. And then anything can happen. Flamengo might be able to get the release of the player who wants to play for Flamengo again. Flamengo might get this done today, or it might take a little longer. They might dig in their heels. They might want him to leave only at the end of the transfer window, or maybe they'll insist that he leaves only in the middle of the year, trying to make a deal with Lucas Paquetá. All of this will unfold today. Flamengo is still there, believing they can reach an agreement with Lucas Paquetá as soon as possible for now. And Esther is trying to hold him a little longer, trying to convince him, make a deal with the player so he returns to training and playing. They're trying everything, trying to get him to fulfill a bit more of his contract, despite everything that's come out, with the fans there being upset, asking for him to leave and all that. The information I have is that Esther is still trying to make a deal with Lucas Paquetá, regardless of any agreement with Flamengo. Knowing that he's going to Esther, they all know he's leaving for Flamengo. They already know it's a reality that Paquetá is going to play for Flamengo. It's the player's decision. They've already been informed. Now it's up to Flamengo. It's a waiting game to see who will give in. First, it's a matter of timing, of when he'll come to play, when he'll be released by Esther, and what the amount will be. If the amount approaches 40 million euros, Flamengo should operate within that range, setting a limit near 40 million euros. Like I said, but it's very close. They already know he's leaving. Esther already knows that Paquetá is going to Flamengo. Now it's just, I've been saying this a lot. The issue is to set the date when he will report to Flamengo, the date when this deal will be closed, and the exact value of the deal. All right? I invite you to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications by clicking the bell, and leave a cool like on the video. Thank you so much for your company. Greetings from Bruno Negros. This is Flamengo. Big hug. Thanks.